Thank you, Erin, and thank you everyone here at Wall Space for inviting me to come and speak about my work. I've really been embracing the digital art world for the last few months, and it's so nice to be able to come and actually be in a physical space and have people appreciate the art, so thank you. And thank you for all coming and listening to my talk today. My work depicts an uncertain future where cities blend with nature. Through an optimistic lens, I create unique urban landscape paintings that combine multiple locations into a single composition. Taking inspiration from my travels, I explore the conflicting relationships that exist between nature and cities. I'm trying to portray urban life at its best, thinking about ways that we can work with nature instead of against it. As climate change continues and extreme weather events become more frequent, questions about our future, be they utopian or apocalyptic, are made more urgent. All of my paintings are created without paintbrushes. I use squeeze bottles filled with liquid paint to build each piece from the ground up with hundreds of lines and dots. After experimenting with gravity and rotating my canvas, I'm able to manipulate where and how each drip will fall. The architectural aspects of my work are highly controlled, while the natural elements embody the spontaneous liquid impulse. My work wrestles with these opposing forces, just as my own optimism wrestles with reality. So I'm going to show you a short 1-minute long video that gives you a better idea of my process. I was featured on Canada AM. I painted live on their studio floor, which was pretty cool. I was featured in Fashion Magazine, and they dressed me up with all fancy clothes and made me be in high heels, and I could barely walk. And I was featured in the Huffington Post and other news blogs and social media channels. And most of these features were very unplanned and unexpected. They all just came from me sharing my work online. So I created my first time-lapse video back in 2011 to kind of explain how my process is. I made the video because I was becoming really frustrated with my inability to communicate the intricacies of my process in a way that other people could easily understand. And I remember feeling extremely vulnerable when I posted that first video online. I didn't know how people were going to react to it. I thought they might question or critique my technique, or maybe, say that it's been done before because, somewhere else in the world, another city, another country, someone must have done this before. But that wasn't the reaction that I got. Everyone was just talking about how unique and innovative my process was, and they'd never seen it before, and that was really exciting for me. I was like, yes, I discovered something new. I mean, that's not what I initially planned to do, but it was kind of a cool after, effect of it. Here are some shots, behind-the-scenes shots of me working in my studio. My technique it developed over a series of years. It took me about 3 years to come up with it, and it came from my desire to create something unique that emphasized my artistic themes, but also brought me joy. It wasn't easy to stop using the tool that I was most comfortable with, which was a paintbrush, but you have to take risks to discover new things. So I started using drips back in 2008 to achieve a more natural, organic energy in my work. And at that time, I used paintbrushes and tape to create all the hard edge details, all the architecture and buildings in my work. But I began to enjoy working with drips more than tape. And as I became more experienced, I realized that with more planning, I could create a painting with drips without using those things. So that became a challenge for me that took years to kind of finally figure out. It was, I was like, oh, this painting is 50% brushless, then 60% brushless, and I worked my way up until finally my first brushless painting in 2011. Now I have more control than ever, and I'm still discovering new things about my technique and little happy accidents that happen along the way, which continue to excite me. Like the leaves, I was just talking to Tiffany today about the leaves on the tree on the far painting, and the way that I do those leaves is, so different than what I used to do, because I put the painting on the ground and I use a water spritzer, and then I realized that if I drip the paint into it, then the paint kind of seeps and creates these leafy textures, and it looks like the light is shining from behind. And I was like, wow, I used to just use dots to make leaves. It was a very exciting moment. I love to travel for inspiration. I explore natural and urban areas, take photos, and return to my studio to get it all down on canvas. I'm in love with tall buildings, trees, and waterfalls, as you can see in all of my work. It's very recurring imagery. A few trip highlights include a 4-day hike across the Grand Canyon in Arizona, spending a night in a tent in the Sahara Desert in Morocco, hiking to Machu Picchu in Peru, and that was my husband. He travels everywhere with me, and he gave me the travel bag. Exploring the many amazing waterfalls in Iceland. This is Plitvice National Park in Croatia, which has inspired so many of my paintings, and it was the first trip that I ever went on after university. I never left Canada before I graduated from university. And this is Horseshoe Bend in Arizona. So to give you an idea or an example of how I translate my inspiration into a painting, I'll show you how I combined Horseshoe Bend with buildings from Vancouver and Las Vegas. So this is a digital study. It's a diptych, so that's why there's a line through the middle. It's a 2-panel piece. But this is, I always create a digital study before I start painting because my work is very planned. So I combine typically 2 to 5 different photographs in Photoshop. I overlay, mask, and draw digitally on the image to come up with my composition and color palette. And once that's complete, I print it out on a 5x7 piece of photo paper in my studio and use that as inspiration for my painting. So here is a shot of the finished painting that was inspired by that digital study. And it's from my Building on the Edge series. It's called Cliff Dwellings. Public art. So I'll talk a little bit about public art. I was recently commissioned by the Oshawa Centre and invited by the Robert McLaughlin Gallery to create this mural commission, which I was just so excited about. I had so much fun creating this mural. It's 14 feet high and 18 feet wide. So I wanted to create a mural for years, but I couldn't wrap my head around how to drip one without spinning the wall. I had no idea how long it would take and if my technique would translate onto this surface. So to make things a little easier on myself, I decided to use one of my completed paintings for inspiration. So you may notice some similarities between this piece behind me and the mural that I created at the OC. I had already spent at least 50 hours perfecting this piece, working on it in my studio. I knew it was going to be a successful composition. So I wanted to use that as a starting point. And I had to break quite a few of my rules while I worked large scale like this. I had to use a brush. I had to remember how to use a brush to do some of the initial color blocking on the wall. And I used tape to create those diagonal lines in the street. And I used a different type of paint. I used house paint to do a lot of the painting and a lot of the drifts. I put the paint in my squeeze bottles, so it was more kind of comfortable. I also used some of my acrylic paint and water spritzer to get some blending effects on the mural. So since this was my first mural, I really expected a lot more hurdles. I thought I had no idea how long it would take me, but it didn't take as long as I expected. And everything just went smoother than I thought it would. So it's so weird. I'm trying something new. I'm gonna, have all these issues. Like the paint's not gonna drip right. Like I don't know about the surface. And there actually was a lot of texture buildup, which I try to avoid when I'm doing my work because any little bit of texture can cause drip to go sideways. And I couldn't really avoid that with this mural because it was so large and there was so many layers. And I was even at a point where some of my acrylic paint was not cooperating with me, and the house paint was amazing. And I was like, it was so thick, it had like a very thick consistency. So it went on top of all the texture and just created these beautiful straight lines, like all of these lines, everything was just dripping straight down. I was just so excited. So I really hope that I can do more murals in the future. I will do more murals in the future. I will make it happen. So futures. This show is called Futures. For years now, I've aimed to create paintings that portray an optimistic future where nature and the city exist in harmony. I've drawn inspiration from sustainable architecture across Canada and explored how nature is incorporated into green building projects. I've developed a very bright, vibrant signature palette to kind of help get across these positive vibes. But despite all these intentions, there's a lot of people who look at my work and see the opposite. They see this apocalyptic world void of people and traffic, a world where nature has gone too far. And hearing everyone's unique interpretations about my work started to push it in the other direction. Because I realized that these conversations are really important. And we need to have these important conversations about our future. So now more than ever, we need to understand the urgency of climate change. Forests are burning, lands are flooding, glaciers are melting. The effects of climate change aren't only happening in other countries, it's happening close to home here in Canada. So my current body of work merges imagery from mostly Canadian and local cities with melting sea ice, burnt forests, rising waters, and droughts. Each painting explores the relationship between climate change, the present environment, and climate change while embodying my natural and constructed visions of the future. I called this series Futures because in each piece I question what's to come. I merge dense city centers with forests and melting sea ice to create alternative visions of the future. Some are more optimistic than others, but I think that it's up to us which future becomes our reality. When you look at one of my paintings, it's not clear how it was made. As I mentioned before, my process is difficult to describe without some kind of digital aid. Augmented reality provides a window into my process and helps inform the viewer about its creation. So I've really embraced this technology. Here's a little example of how I've used it in the past. So this is my booth at the Artist Project in Toronto. And with this device, with a certain app, you can trigger a time-lapse video of the creation of the painting you're looking at. And that's it. Thank you.